everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on the Moana Nui Podcast. I know you probably are noticing we are missing one person. She is on the way. Moana is en route, so she should be joining us in a few minutes. But for those that are new to the podcast, let me introduce myself. My name is Dana. I am the co host for the Moana Nui podcast. I am a cosplay event and con staff photographer. I also do a little voice acting, event planning, and a whole lot more. But I'm looking forward for us to have our guest for tonight. For those that have not joined us before, let me go ahead and introduce our upcoming guest. Uh, there's, of course, the saying, if you know neither your enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Well, the Moana Nui podcast has started a new monthly series that we're calling Rain Talks with clinical social worker Shae Reigns, MSW, that we're going to be having every on the last Thursday of every month at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern. Shae is the founder of Do More Require Better LLC and the host of The Conversation on the Metropolis Network that she allows her hashtag 50% of the hashtag Do More Require Better campaign that dives into the personal topics. She provides perspective shifting opportunities and hope to help others redefine their lives so the only battles you succumb to are the ones you deem essential to winning the war. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a very special topic, which is one that many have a hard time dealing with called grief. And now, let me bring our special guest up to the front with us. Hello, Shae.
Hello, good evening. Aloha.
Well, exactly. We're so glad to have you part of the show tonight. And of course, we're very glad for you to be part of this series that we're having every month. As I was introducing you, I was telling the audience of today's special topic, which is one many have a hard time dealing with, which is grief. But before we get into that, in case for those that are new to the podcast, let's start off with your Pico or your origin story. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how did your passions emerge for becoming coming into this field.
Um, wow, that could totally be a long story. But I am from Brooklyn, New York. Um, Born in Brooklyn, raised all over the place. From my family's from Costa Rica, so definitely some of a few years of my childhood there. Uh, Also Richmond, Virginia, um, Florida, and of course now Atlanta. So I've been a lot of places, done a lot of things. Um, my passion in terms of, we'll say, helping people, to keep it simple,
Mm-hmm.
because that's basically what it is. Uh, was just as simple as me recognizing that it's something I happen to be good at.
Mm.
I actually remember one of the first times I remember helping someone was on the train, uh, going through the World Trade Center once upon a time when, that was a thing. I want to say sometime between or somewhere between 4 and 6 years old. And there was some person, because I don't remember exactly if it was a man or a woman, but they looked really sad and down. And I was not one of those kids who followed the instructions and not talk to strangers. And so I'm there, I'm playing around on the train, and I see this person looking sad, and I just went and I sat next to them, and I was just like, "Hey, do you need a friend?" And so this random adult, I guess maybe was just having a bad day, now has this little girl talking to them, and they're like, "Wait," not they. I was like, "Wait," and so I get them out of the chair, drag them over to where my mom was, and I'm like, "This is my friend. What's your name again?" And they say their name, and just like, "Is it okay if I put them now so that they're not strangers?" And my mom is laughing, of course, and the other adult is laughing, no longer looking down, um, and literally just played on the train for the rest of the ride. So that's kind of just what it's always been for me.
Mhm.
I see people, I meet people, people talk to me. So I have definitely become a lot less forward in my growth. Um, but that's just what it's always been. It's always been a situation where I can't see someone not okay and do nothing.
Mhm.
And so that's just what
Yes.
it's always been.
Awesome. Now, of course, kind of tying into, that experience of seeing someone sad. Uh, Today's topic we're going to dive into is about grief. Uh, can you explain about what grief is and the 7 stages of grief for those that may not know about them?
Sure, but I really want to take it a slightly different direction, just
Okay.
especially because of the time that we're in now. Um, Let me start by saying I am not a grief specialist or grief counselor. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I can, I can certainly talk to anyone about anything at any time, but there are specialists out there who do specifically deal just basically with grief and handling grief. And if you are in the worst of grief, I strongly recommend seeing a specialist if you can. So
Mm-hmm.
that's my little disclaimer there.
Yes.
uh, as to the question of what is grief, um, grief is generally a word that we use to describe a feeling of extreme loss. That's not Google or a definite or a direct real definition or anything like that. That's just simple layman's understanding. It's the feeling that you have when you lose something,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the grieving process. And this is really important. The actual grieving process can take anywhere from 6 months to 4 years.
Mm.
So it's really important to understand that if you are grieving, which, by the way, we are all in one form of grief or another right now.
Mm-hmm.
We have all lost a lot in this last year and a half of COVID. And it's so important to recognize that you're not alone in this experience, because it's not just, oh, I don't have a right to feel any type of way because I didn't lose anyone directly. Um, there's a thing out there, some might call it like the universal consciousness or whatever, and it connects us all. And so to a certain extent, the lost lives, the lost jobs, the lost economy, there's a lot of loss that we are all suffering right now. And so we're all in a different kind of grief, like all global. Everyone is experiencing grief right now to a certain extent. Some more severe than others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, but the 7 stages of grief, and they don't necessarily happen in this order, nor do they happen in any specific order to be exact. And you can go into one phase, into another phase, and then right back into the other phase. So you can repeat phases, which is
Mm-hmm.
why the grieving process can take even up to 4 years.
Yes.
So that is, or those stages are shock, disbelief, denial, everyone's favorite, bargaining, guilt, anger, depression, and acceptance and hope. What I
Mhm.
also want to say is throughout all of the stages, there's an element of hope. It's kind of
Yeah.
like the parable about Pandora's box, where
Mm-hmm.
it was all of the world's sorrows, everything that was coming out of the box, and at the very bottom, hope was always there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's your definition.
There you go. Well, thank you for giving that to us. Now, of course, as you gave earlier, you gave um, a lot of people deal with loved ones, family members telling them that they should be quote unquote done with grieving. Like there's supposed to be a time frame for grief. You mentioned earlier that there's it can range anywhere for a couple months to several years. Uh, is there really a true is there really a true definition of amount of time it takes to resolve the grief of losing a loved one?
Well, here's the thing. I'll give you a scenario. So let's say, for example, today we suffer a very specific loss of one specific life. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then you suffer a loss of, let's say, a job.
Mm-hmm.
And then a year from now, you suffer the loss of some other, maybe not even necessarily as close as the first one, but some other cared for person
Mm-hmm.
or animal or entity, right? That's a compounding grief.
Yes.
Okay. And that's actually life.
Mm-hmm.
It happens so often in life where you go from one grieving situation into another grieving situation, and you never actually got to finish grieving the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happens to people in general. So it
Yes.
could be, you lose your loved one, then you um, have a breakup, or you and your friend have an argument, or there are just so many different things that happen in between and during the grieving process that can basically just compound the losses and really make things emotionally inconceivable.
Mm-hmm.
So no, there's technically, I would say, no definitive. Even if we're going by 6 months to 4 years, at the end of the 4 year mark, it's like, bam, okay, perfect. You're all the way through. No, that's not how life works.
Mm-hmm.
Because more often than not, especially when you think about, in the corporate world, your grief time, your time for bereavement is usually a couple of days.
Yeah.
So, if you have a conventional job and you lose someone, you've got 2 days to get your mind right and get
Yeah.
back to work.
Mm-hmm.
And mind you, that's just 2 days to get your mind right. That's not necessarily taking into account um, the actual, whether you have a funeral or any of those kinds of things. You go and you see family members that you haven't seen in God knows how long, those kinds of things that happen. Uh, they only give you those 2 to 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might continue going to work while you are grieving so that you can have the few days that you can go to, the funeral or to the
Mm-hmm.
wake or to the memorial service or whatever situation that, you do culturally.
Mm-hmm.
You got 3 days for that.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm
So,
really glad you brought that point up, Shay, because, um, I remember when I was dealing with the loss of my father, it was even harder. Like, I was fortunate where, my job like had time for you to take care of parents, and they would pay for it. But For people who don't, like, that's super difficult. And then also, if your parents are not where you are and you have to travel to them, like, all those things kind of make it even more challenging when you're already dealing with, this loss that you have in your life. So,
Right. And, I'll be the first one to say humaning ain't easy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Peopling ain't easy. So if
Mm-hmm.
you have to be
Adulting
going
ain't
through,
easy.
okay, any of that, none of that is easy. All right. And whoever is out there who is saying, yes, it is, more power to you. I would love to have a conversation with you because you could help us all.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not easy. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how much success you're experiencing. I don't necessarily want to say her name direct out of sensitivity for her experience, but a very famous young lady who recently was penalized and taken out of the Olympic
Mm-hmm.
mm-hmm.
races, was running right after losing
Yep.
one of the most important people in her life.
Yes.
And she had to go out there and quote unquote perform
Mm-hmm.
to the world
Yes.
and act like quote unquote normal. And she's being penalized for doing something that she felt like she needed to do in order to get through that situation, to
Yes.
perform for the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, it's one of those things that we have these extreme expectations for people with no consideration
Yes.
for their reality, for their feelings, for their experience, um, and that's just how. Sorry, that's just how we choose to treat other human beings, and because humaning, it ain't easy.
Exactly. Exactly. And
Sorry.
that's okay. Definitely get you some water. um, and that's always an interesting point because um, I do constantly hear people tell like, okay, you should be over it now. Or one, my favorite is the go to of just suck it up and keep going, and you
Right.
just have to internalize everything. And I know a lot of people are like, okay, they don't get a chance to process the grief and all. Um, another question I have for you is we also deal with the, I call it the other spectrum of the grief, which is you people who do lose loved ones, but they don't have the emotional and immediate response that people expect to have. The breaking down and crying, the falling down and crying at the funeral. They are very stoic. But you also hear, which I always say it's like the double-edged sword. If you're too emotional about it, they tell you need to get over it. But then if you're not showing you're stoic, there's something wrong. Obviously, this person didn't mean that much to you if you're not crying, but they will say, I, I inside I want to cry, but it's not coming out. How how is that? How can those people that are dealing with that other end try to help people, their family members and loved ones, to understand they are grieving, but just not in the way um that they're expected to.
The key word here is expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go back to humaning, peopling, adulting ain't easy.
Yes.
Um, so our expectations for other people in general are irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's one of those things that nobody really wants to hear, but that is the fact of the matter. So it really doesn't matter in any real terms what your expectations are for another human being, um, and thus we can hopefully come to a place where we understand that other people's expectations for us or for ourselves is also irrelevant, especially when it comes to how we experience our emotions. It's really important, especially when we're talking about grieving and having our space to experience our emotions, that we understand that there's no set in stone way how to experience your emotions. Some people, when they get really angry, they seem really happy. They get really giggly, they seem to be really giddy, or they actually cry. So people think, oh, this person must be really sad, when in fact what they're really doing is contemplating murder. Okay, that is a real thing. um, how people expect other people to react is just that it's someone else's opinion. And we all know that saying about opinions and doorknobs or toilet seats or whatever. you know, Everybody likes to take a turn, but it really only matters if you're the one with the key. And so when we're talking about how to deal with other people,
Mm-hmm.
um, quite the other people are irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Other people's opinions in those situations especially are irrelevant, because if you do not allow yourself to grieve in the way that you need to grieve, your grieving process is going to, I'm not going to say kill you, although it has killed people, the grieving process of not being able to grieve the way they need to grieve. But I don't want to say that it'll kill you, but it can definitely cause additional emotional distresses, additional life stresses, additional losses. Because now we're talking about, okay, I'm trying to grieve the way I want to grieve, and now I have to remove these people from my life who are trying to force me to grieve in a way that makes them comfortable. Because that's what
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about making other people feel comfortable with how it is that you're processing your emotions.
Yeah.
And so now you're dealing with another set of loss. Now you are subjecting either yourself, if you're the person grieving, or the person you care about, if it's someone you care about who's grieving, quote unquote, inappropriately. You're enforcing, or you're forcing your needs on them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, in real simple, non-clinical terms, back up, back
Yeah.
off.
Yes.
That's the simplest way to put it. Tell your loved ones, um, back off and STFU.
Yeah. Now, seeing, JD is saying, remember to put the seat down and jiggle the doorknob to confirm there's TP
TP.
is the words for life. You're right,
Thank you.
Shay. Also, JD also brought up a point that of course, he's joking, but at the same time, I want to
Mm-hmm.
take it into the serious aspect. Is he's joking, saying, I found some um, emotions in my mailbox the other day, and I marked it return to sender. A lot of times,
Mm.
people feel that they are not allowed to express their emotions when they're dealing with grieving or any other spectrums of emotions. How, and especially for men are told that
Yikes.
it is not appropriate for them to show any kind of emotion. How can for a man or anyone that are in that situations, how can they be able to be their true authentic selves and be able to show, to cry, to get angry, to go through those stages of grief?
I think it's one of this also really important when it comes to the grieving process is a support system. And we, culturally speaking, in this, on this side of the world, we do not support our men or boys in experiencing a full spectrum of emotions. Um, we expect a lot of them. And if we rewind 3 to the conversation about expectations, we can know and understand that those are irrelevant. What we really need to do is we need to be supportive, and we need to make sure that our men and boys have good support systems so that they can function, so that we're not seeing the same levels of, suicide rates in our men, so we're not seeing the same level of chemical dependency or alcohol use, drug use, uh, all of the maladaptive coping mechanisms that are out there that are predominantly used by men and boys. I can't stress enough men and boys, because it doesn't start when you become an adult and recognize that adulting ain't easy. It actually starts when you are, I want to say the age range, if I'm remembering correctly, is actually about 7. So, developmentally speaking, those messages get really cemented in a 7-year-old kid. So imagine looking at a 7-year-old and saying, basically, you're not allowed to feel feelings. That is, in a lot of the world, the message that men and boys get at that age.
Yes.
Our job as a society, our job as a global community, to basically stop doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, plain and simple, stop doing that. Stop
Yes.
um, thinking or believing and then reinforcing that belief that men and boys aren't allowed to emote.
Yes.
Uh, because, quite frankly, you're giving me clients, and my job is to talk myself out of a job. So stop that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What it is, just stop that. And if you are a boy and you don't have a support system or people in your life who are supportive of you getting to feel and experience the full range of your emotions, then
Mm-hmm.
find a therapist or a grief
Yes.
counselor, um,
Mm-hmm.
because being allowed full range of emotions, it's not necessarily just about being able to fully experience your grief, but when
Yes.
we don't allow ourselves to fully experience the quote unquote bad stuff, we also don't get to fully experience the good stuff. We don't
Yes.
get to fully recognize when the good emotions are happening. It makes experiencing the good things that much more difficult.
Mm.
So please get that support system, get that help,
Yeah.
um, find people to have conversations with, and of course, socially speaking, stop reinforcing those ideas.
Exactly. Now, also in that same vein, a lot of times, especially in BIPOC communities, that the women are expected to be strong during the grieving process too, to be that pillar for everyone else, that they grieve and cry, but they have to be strong and support everyone else. Um, how can, as loved ones and family and friends, help change that directive in our women too, to allow them to be vulnerable, to be able to let those emotions out and not feel like they have to be strong, work their jobs, and raise the kids and everything else without even, dropping a tear.
That is a great question. And it has several layers and levels of difficulty, because we're not just talking about, once again, we're not just talking about, family members and friends. We're talking an entire social makeup, um, where women in the diaspora will say, right? Full spectrum. If you are you know, darker than white, um, that is often going to be the expectation. Okay, because all we're talking about here at this point is expectations, and it's really important that we recognize that, of course, this is also my personal experience. So my disclaimer here is, it is difficult for me on many different levels to give the solution when this is a situation that I myself live. So, in fairness, there's my second disclaimer of the night. Um,
Okay.
when it comes down to it, what I have found in my personal life now that has helped me is, one, of course, my support. I have also a strong sisterhood. Um,
Hmm.
recently had this conversation.
Yes.
I have a strong sisterhood. Um, I have other women in my corner who help and support me and back me up and encourage me, and who are there for me in ways that allow me to decide for myself, today is a day where I get to feel all of my feels. And it just so happens that I get to make that decision fairly frequently, again, especially because of my support system. Um, I also have a very strong support system of brothers. I have a brotherhood that most people would envy and kill for. I have a collective of men in my life, most of whom are Black, um, who back me up, hold me down, pump their fists, and are overall supportive. They are cheerleaders, in the strongest sense of words. I have great man friends, I have great sister friends, um, and this is what helps me. Um, and I say that with also the other disclaimer, which most people don't generally believe. I'm an introvert. And I have a circle of human beings who, basically will rip me out of my shell if I spend just a little bit too much time in there. Um, so that's how I get through. I strongly suggest that a support system, because I'm just real, you can't mind. Um, I don't share well, no, but you can't have mine. I have a very specific set of people, but I hope that you can find people and learn how to identify people who support you the way you need to be supported. And then, of course, under that or within that is also being able to ask for the kind of support that you need. So if you need to vent, you should be able to pick a friend or pick a family member and say, hey, um, I'm having an moment. I need to vent. Is now a good time? It's important that you actually ask permission, because you never know if that person who you are going to might be going through their own thing at the same time and is not necessarily going to be able to provide the kind of emotional support that you need. Okay? So I strongly
Yes.
suggest ask permission,
Yes.
okay, and then move forward with how it is that you need to get through your emotional moment.
Hmm.
Um, also get comfortable admitting that you're having an emotional moment.
Yes.
Um, because I went through a good phase of my life, as I know many other individuals have gone through, where emotions equal weakness. And or emotions mean that you're being illogical, or being emotional means that you're being irrational, any of those things. Um, let me drop a little bit of factoid in here for the purpose of supporting my argument. um, there's a thing called the reptilian brain, Reptilian brain is our instincts. Though that is the most part of the brain when we first come out. That is also basically no logic needed there. It's, gosh, I'm hungry, cry. And so baby cries. Okay, there's no real logic there. There's just action, reaction, feeling, aka emotion, and then reaction to said emotion. The first thing that we do as human beings when we come out is emote and react. We learn other people's emotions first, not logic, not language, not anything else. We learn emotional reaction first. Even before we are actually born, we are experiencing the emotional reactions of our. Before we are even conceived, we are carrying the emotional and stress responses of both of our parents. Not logic, not reading, not writing, not arithmetic, emotional intelligence. Okay, so we are born with this. This is something that comes naturally to us. So when we try to, as JD said, return to sender, we might as well actually be returning to sender the rest of our brain,
Yes.
the rest of our actual intelligence, which is required to learn the rest of what it is that we need to learn to exist on this plane as we are. We cannot do what it is that we do as human beings without the emotional part, without the reptilian brain. Without
Mm-hmm.
that, we are not, period. So let's take it out the mailbox, unpack it, and work with what it is that we literally came here with.
Yes.
I don't know how else to put it. So,
Mm.
ladies, if you don't, because that's where the question. If you aren't yet comfortable feeling your emotions, trusting your instincts, um, believe that those are the first things that you came here to this plane with. That is your strength.
Yes.
So, and just for clarity, all human beings start out this way, not just women. So, get comfortable understanding that that is a necessary part of who you are. That is the first thing that develops. That's the first part of your brain that gets developed. That's the thing that creates how it is that you understand and interact with the world.
Mm. Yes. Now, of course, my next question that I have for you is a lot of people they have I call um, your non-human family members that you lose and you grieve over, and a lot of people you hear people talk about, oh, animals can't be family. They're animals. They're your pets can't be family members. They can't be considered like your kids and stuff. So a lot of people I know in the audience and things have dealt with trying for people to understand the grieving process they're trying to go through and losing their love, their family dog, their family cat. How what advice do you give to those people in the audience that are dealing with that and trying to uh they have those family members that support them in the human version of grieving, but they're not getting that support for their pet that they love, that's been with them for years, that maybe their emotional response uh, support dog or cat or things like that. And a lot of people don't associate the animals to those emotions also.
Um, for the sake of inclusivity and my absolute love for animals, I'll also say pigs, ponies, ferrets, rodents. Not my thing, but some people really love their hamsters, goldfish, which is so crazy for me personally because I'm just like their lifespan can be so short. You're just signing up for emotional distress. But whatever your pet, your four-legged or less friend or family member um, feel your feelings. If you need a permission slip, please feel free to reach out and I will write you one. Okay. You have permission to grieve and to experience grief and all of your every level of emotion, because we are a communal species. And in addition to us being a communal species, we are a connection needing species. And we will generally take and make those connections however it is that we can. And I'm going to take it in a completely different direction, when I say there are people who get attached to things. And when I say things, I'm not talking about actual sentient beings like animals. I'm saying they are truly connected to their dresser. They're extremely connected to the blanket. They are super connected to that flashlight. Whatever it is, okay, people get connected to things. And then there are the very extreme forms of connected and attachment, where it turns into objectophilia or hoarding. Or not or, and. It can be hoarding, okay? And we also know there are animal hoarders out there too. So not to diminish the connection that we create with our other animal friends, but when we look at the need for human connection, especially in the world that we live today, where sometimes the most connection that you'll get is, especially in these COVID times, a Zoom call, right? Or your best friends are people who live hundreds of thousands of miles away, even on a whole nother continent. And so the only way that you can actually connect to those people is, this way, looking at them on a screen. We have to stop being so rigid in our understanding of how it is that human beings do what we do. I'm not going to say necessarily that objectophilia or hoarding is healthy, because of course those are very extreme situations. But I am going to say having an appreciation for and loving your pet who you spend, when before my dog passed, I could say I spent more money trying to feed and entertain this little attitudinal ball of fur than I was spending on myself at the time. Not to mention the vet visits and the grooming and the, all that other kind of thing. Let me tell you, it was all worth it whenever it is that I was feeling a feeling. Somehow he recognized it and just come and sit on my lap. Or, as was also custom, to nudge me into getting up, because I'm not allowed to sit in the same position for too long and seem like I'm not okay. That's what my dog did for me. You don't know what it is that those furry friends are doing, or not furry friends, for those of you who are connected to animals who are furless. You don't know what it is that they're getting from that connection. And especially because we cannot necessarily always be there for everyone. Not everyone is necessarily going to be comfortable having the same kinds of conversations. Not everyone is as in tune or willing to be empathetic in the same kinds of ways at any time, let alone at 3:00 in the morning, when the feeling may hit you and your furry friend is there like, oh, I guess we're getting up now. So let's not be so rigid. Let's not put our own shortcomings or our own expectations, our own values of things or animals or whatever on other people just because that's not what you're into. Like I said, I'm not into the whole rodent thing except for ferrets, which I'm not sure if those are rodents or not, but ferrets are great. Love them. If you are really attached and connected with your gerbil or your hamster or, your bunny or whatever the creature is, your goldfish, your koi, whatever it is, Komodo dragon. No, that's not what those are called. Bearded dragon. There we go. Bearded dragons, um, ball pythons, whatever it is that you're connected to. Okay. Um, enjoy that connection, embrace whatever it is that you're getting out of that, because it's one more thing that you are doing to keep yourself functioning. So other people's opinions are irrelevant. Do what you do, enjoy yourself, love that animal to whatever degree that you can, and love and be loved openly, freely, willingly.
Yes, thank you for that. As we're getting close to the end time, because of course, as everyone knows, Rain, Shae is a very busy woman. She has another podcast, and she's going right after this one. So we will be not having a full hour for this episode. So we're going to ask her one more question before we get ready to end this episode, so she can go ahead and have a quick transition over to her next show. Uh, our last question is: many people don't consider the grief part of the loss of a close or dear relationship, whether it's a family member, a friend, or even a dating relationship. Um, are are there really any differences between grief of the death of a loved one versus grief of the loss of a relationship? And what advice do you offer to those mourning a loss of a relationship?
So, like I said when we first started, um, pretty much any loss can put you through grief. Um, there are some differences because there are different levels of connection, so to speak. And there are different, we go back to the reptilian brain. There are different ways that we experience these connections and the depth of these connections. So, where someone might be experiencing grief because of a death, someone else may value their romantic relationships to the same degree as they would value an entire life. Okay, and I can conceptualize that by saying when we're talking about our relationships with other human beings, we're talking about different elements of our lives. It is literally like losing a piece of your own life when you are experiencing loss of another person. And if you can imagine, I'm choosing my words very carefully here because, okay, trigger warning. There we go. That's a thing. If you can imagine having lost a person who was the dearest to you, one of the things that you were actually also experiencing was a loss of a part of your life that you thought you were going to have. Rewind that real quick so I make sure that I'm painting the picture properly for you. So you are experiencing your life with this other person, this other, animal, whatever. Plans. We have expectations. We have things that we want to do and accomplish. We have things that we want to do and accomplish, and we hope that the other person, whoever that may be, will be there when we accomplish it or when we don't accomplish it. Okay. These other beings in our lives are there as a part of that experience. And so when we lose that relationship, when we lose the actual person, when we experience that loss, we are also experiencing the loss of what could have been in the future. It all depends on what you were thinking, what you were imagining, and what you were planning to experience with that person. Does that make sense? So when we're having the conversation about loss and we are, trying to put grades on it, it's an unfair thing to do because you are grading based on your sense of connection to whatever it is and not based on their sense of connection. You don't know what that person was planning. So once again, your expectations, so irrelevant. This could have, that being could have been a huge part of, where it is that they wanted to go in life. I cried for days, for example, when Nelson Mandela passed. I did not cry for any period of time at all when my father died, because one of the things that I wanted was to one day meet Nelson Mandela. That is now never going to happen. That was a twofold loss for me, and that was somebody who I had never met, specifically because I wanted to meet him. Cried for days. Not even exaggerating. I cried, ugly cried, heard the news, sat in my room, ugly cried, slept, ugly cried some more over someone who I had never met. And we all have some of those kinds of situations, when we lose artists or when we lose speakers. I had not exactly as tearful, but there are other role models that I had growing up who've also passed that I mourned more than I have mourned some of my family members. So it's really important the plan and how these losses or how these disconnections affect what it is that you were thinking or what it is that you were conceptualizing or wanting for your entire life plan or their entire life plan.
Definitely. And we definitely thank you for that. I know um, we will definitely go ahead and thank you for your time. That way you have a couple minutes to transition over to your next podcast. So thank
Thank
you
you.
again, Shae, for being a part of this. As she mentioned earlier, if you are dealing with extreme grief, definitely seek out a counselor or a therapist to help you. There are grief counselors that specialize in grief itself. So definitely reach out, build your support system to help you through these moments that you can be able to process and grieve the way you can for yourself. So, Shae, thank you again for being a part of us. We're going to go ahead and let you drop so you can have
Thank
a
you.
couple minutes to get over to the other part. And me and Moana will wrap up while you transition over. So, thank you again, everyone. Please, as you see on the bottom of the tracker on the bottom, follow Shae on her social media for you to connect. If you would like to reach out to her to set up a therapy session with her, definitely reach out to her. She is on Facebook at SDA period Reigns, or on Twitter at Reign of Change. You can reach her at either one of those platforms, and definitely the network she does her other podcast with is the the Metropolis Network.com. You can also go to the Metropolis Network.com to tune in for her episode called The Conversation that she has every week. So
And
thank
we
you
just
again.
actually dropped one of my episodes today. at about 6 o'clock.
Okay.
So
All
there is
right.
an
So
episode up now. But
so
thank you
she
so
just
much,
dropped
guys.
one.
And also, I just want to drop one more before I go. Um, that is to a certain extent, I guess, a plug, but also in terms of building your networks and building your support system, having conversations is so important. So don't be afraid to talk about whatever it is that you need to talk about, because that's the way how your support system is going to learn you. Again,
Yes.
thank you so much for having me, ladies, and have a
Thank
great
you
night.
so much. Have a great evening, and we will see you next month. All
Yes,
right,
ma'am.
everyone. Thank you for joining. And of course, as you know, at the end of the Moana Nui podcast, we always have our Moana Nui drawing. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up so we can get our drawing for tonight's episode. Let me pull that up. Bear with me. All right, here we go. And let's see who our winner is for tonight. Okay, here we go. Okay. All right. Well, is it going to let me do it?
Oh, maybe because there's only one entry, so the winner is JD.
Well, actually, we had two. We had J Man and JD. So I guess it's okay. JD, you are a winner. So JD, message Moana or on the Moana Nui podcast so we can get your contact information so we can send you your prize for tonight's episode. So thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, definitely everyone who's watching, tune back in at 8:30 p.m. tonight. That's 8:30 in 30 minutes. We're going to have a very special episode, which is our Moana Nui Present panel on microaggressions. If you do not know what microaggressions are, this is a great opportunity to learn about microaggressions. See if you have experienced microaggressions, and my camera is going in a different direction. Come on, camera. It's doing its own thing. All right, everybody. Uh, so definitely tune in. We have a great lineup of panelists and a moderator. We're going to have Rosa Avery Singletary. We have Davy Celeste and Christian O and several others that you have seen on the podcast, but they're going to be talking about this very important conversation that you need to learn about, that will help you navigate not only in your personal life but also at work. So we thank you all for tuning in for our 7 o'clock episode, and we will see you at 8:30 tonight in 30 minutes. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening, and we'll see you in 30 minutes.
Righty, everyone.